Hi guys, Will Terry here, and this video is going to be called Getting and Receiving a Critique. And this video is being made primarily, mostly for our forums at svslearn.com. And so if you're already in our forums, then you're watching this video there, presumably. And if you're on YouTube, then you're going, I'm not in the forums. So you can still watch. I don't know. Okay. So I got a letter from Nat, and I'm just going to read that. He says, after being involved in the forums for a bit, I'm noticing something that might be helpful to address. Let's see, we all benefit from constructive criticism and feedback, but sometimes it's like the blind leading the blind, or people feeling like they need to change their illustration to fit every suggestion, unable to filter good and bad advice or great advice given in a difficult to accept way. So it'd be awesome to hear your words of advice on both giving and receiving constructive feedback on illustrations. I think it would benefit us and that more in that realm. So, okay. So the forums are the forums, and we don't own those. I mean, like, we do, but we don't. Like, it's like the internet. It's the Wild West. Anything happens. I'm going to give advice, but you can take it or leave it. I'm definitely not laying down the law, and I really would hate for someone to say, well, Will said, this is just my advice. Okay. So giving a critique. I believe that we're here to treat others with, basically to find happiness, but to treat others with respect and kindness, and also to help each other. Like, I believe that the only way that I ever find happiness is through helping others. But more on that on the Sunday school lesson edition, right? And I'm not trying to imply anything about, you have to be religious to help other people, because everybody helps other people. From all walks of life. And I think that a lot of people have found truth in that when you give, you get, right? So that is actually why I started teaching in the first place. Was I was given the opportunity, and I've learned in my life that when you help other people with their work, you end up learning just as much, if not more. Because to put things into words, you end up, it's crazy how it happens, but that's how you make epiphanies and discoveries. And so I was very open to teaching early on, even when I was horrible, in helping other people, and that just makes you better. Okay. So, that's the first thing. The next thing, is I believe you should only give a critique if you truly want to help someone else. Right. So there are probably a lot of other reasons that people might want to give a critique. And I think that the only real one should be motivated in, I truly want to help you. That's it. Just person to person, I want to help you. Not if you are trying to make yourself look good, and so you want to, tear someone else down in order to maybe feel like you're looking like you know more than them or something like that. That's definitely a recipe for disaster. And another time not to give a critique is when someone just gave you one, and so you're like, hey, I need to give you a critique now and give you a piece of my mind. Critique, right? So no retaliation critiques, right? Is probably good advice, And the other thing is, I think that, in Nat's letter, it really brought up some good points. Like, we're all at different levels. So if what happens if you get a critique from somebody who is below you or doesn't understand, or they give you bad advice and it's bad advice, or maybe you don't know it's bad advice. I believe, and I'll talk about that at the end a little bit more, but I really believe that you should not withhold giving a critique, even if you feel like you're down lower. Because again, I think it's just as much for you as it is for the person that you're trying to help. And I don't think that you'll ever, one day, just be ready to give critiques. I think you have to practice that along the way. So I would encourage everybody to give their 2 cents, as long as with the caveat that you are trying to help them. You're truly trying to help them. So my advice I'll give you some advice for giving a critique and for receiving one. And these are just things that I jotted down. It's not, I'm sure there's others in there, and I would love to see in the comments, if you guys have other ideas and stuff. But I think a critique always goes down better when you start off with some positive message of something that you really like. And that can be hard sometimes, because sometimes you see a piece of art and there really isn't a whole lot that you like about it. In some situations, if I feel like the artist is at just an extremely low level where they really haven't spent any time and there's just a kind of a scribble thing put out there, I try to, if I can't find anything good, I figure, they're just that piece of art just isn't developed enough, and I'll kind of shy away from doing critiques on those a lot of times, just because I feel like there's not enough meat there to really know where the direction's even going, and that the artist is really that might be another thing, is that maybe the artist really hasn't invested much. So then if you give a critique, you might be investing more time than they did on their art at that point. So sometimes I think it's good to just not give a critique, if you feel like you can't really say anything good about the artwork. The second one is be specific. So if you don't like something, if you think they should change something in the art, try to give them specifics instead of vague ideas of, I think it needs to be darker or something. Well, what does that mean? If it's just darker, is it you just darken the whole thing? No, I mean like darker in that area. Oh, in that area. And what, like exactly what are you talking about? Like if you're not willing to spend the time to actually be specific and to give good advice, you probably shouldn't. Your heart's probably not in actually giving the critique. So errant and flippant comments are probably not helpful. Even if maybe you think that they might be, we all have, like some people have the idea of tough love, like to tell someone that their thing is horrible so that they'll work harder. And I don't really subscribe to that. I don't think that's really that helpful. Site number 3 would be, you might think about, and this is optional, but just maybe citing a principle of design that you've learned about or that you've come to know is true. So as you're saying, this thing needs to be changed in this way, it's darker, or maybe there needs to be more crisp edges in the foreground or something. You might also cite that principle of, things that come closer to us, or the edges are sharper, and things in the distance, the edges start to get more blurry. And so like qualifying your statement with an actual principle in design is really helpful. Number 4, be humble. Remember that we're critiquing art, right? So it's hard to apply rigid rules. And I just got finished talking about, citing a principle. Well, the principles of design, they're rules, but these kinds of rules are always meant to be broken. Like if you break math rules, your equations aren't going to work, right? So breaking rules in math, there's probably not too many mathematicians that are like, yeah, you should just break rules sometimes, but in art, if you have a specific reason to break a rule, then sometimes you can actually create a really cool effect and communicate something really unexpected through breaking a rule. But again, laziness is not a reason to break a rule. So being humble and saying, hey, you might qualify your comments and say, look, this is just an opinion of mine. This is just a feeling that I have, and use words like that. Not try to say, I'm still on number 4, but not try to say, you need to do this or you need to do that. They don't need to do this and they don't need to do that. You're giving them help. You're giving them advice. You're giving them suggestions. So your critique is a suggestion. Be humble in the fact that you're saying, look, this is just an idea I had. You may like it. You may not. Try to give that kind of a critique, and then people don't feel like, I have to do this. And be humble again. Be humble over and over again. Say that there's the suggestions that I'm giving, the solutions that I'm offering. They're going to take you in a direction to solve this problem, but there are thousands of solutions out there. So even though in my vision I can see you solving the problem this way, you may come up with a different way to solve it. But what I'm identifying is a problem that I see in your work, but it can be solved in different ways. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then number 6, if the artist disagrees with your critique, let them. If they respond back to your critique and totally disagree with it, remember that neither one of you is right, because this is art, right? So they're not right, you're not right, and you're not giving a critique to be right. You're giving a critique to help. If they don't feel like what you gave them helped, then it's like, if you're trying to feed a homeless person and you bought them a cheeseburger and they're like, I'm not hungry, and you're shoving the cheeseburger down there. No, you will be hungry later, and you're force feeding them. That's not really helpful. So just because you think they need something, if they're not in the receptive mode, just back away. And I might also say, I was going to say this in the beginning, that I've been in the forums a lot, and I've never seen any rudeness or ugliness or this is more preemptive than anything else. Like the only thing I've seen is maybe when Nat's talking about people feeling like they have to take every suggestion and make every change because someone gave it. But I haven't seen any other stuff, and so I don't want people to think that Will's making this video because there were problems or anything. There really haven't been. Okay, let's jump down to receiving a critique. So if you're on the receiving end, this is my advice there. Number 1, try to go into it assuming the best intentions from the person who's giving the critique of your work. Like, you may know them, you may have seen their comments on other things, and people come in all sizes and flavors, and some people might come off a little abrasive, but inside they're not meaning to at all, and so sometimes, and I might say this, that just know this, that the more of a beginner you are at this, the harder it is to get a critique. It hurts because we've spent this time, we've put value down, and someone's telling us the value you see in this is much lower or much higher than where I see the value. I'm wanting you to change stuff. So immediately I'm taking the position of saying your stuff has less value, when really it's not like that at all. That's the perception we get sometimes. But it's hard to change something that you've spent time in, and you're telling yourself, you're in that mode of telling yourself how good it is, when really, again, just remember that in a year from now, or in 6 months, or a year from now, in 5 years from now, you won't care about this piece of art you're working on right now. Art is disposable. The stuff you're making is disposable. You should be making lots of art. The more art you make, the less value each piece will have, the better it will get, and eventually the art that you're making will have a lot more value because it's going to be ramping up over time. So try to assume the best intentions. Number 2, try to understand what the person is saying, and really try to understand. Like, sometimes people just hear, someone's giving them a critique, and all they hear is your artwork's bad, and they just go with that. I've seen this before with students. It's like, you guys just think my art is bad. No, you got to try to understand what the person's saying. Now, if the person is being rude, then all bets are off. But you don't have to. At that point, I would ignore. If you don't understand their suggestions, ask for clarification politely. Right? I mean, these are obvious. All right. Number 4, only take advice that rings true to you and that you feel might be right. So it's interesting because I've been doing this for a long time and getting paid for doing illustration, and I post stuff on Facebook and on Twitter and places, and I get critiques from people unsolicited all the time. People will just give me their 2 cents on what they think. And I've developed a thick enough skin to where I'm like, you know what? This person cares about me. even though I don't want to change my art sometimes, what I've come to realize is this person cares about me. So even if they're completely wrong, and sometimes they're totally wrong, or sometimes they don't understand the concept that I'm trying to put forward, and sometimes they're totally right. Just the other day, I did a fan art piece, and there was a problem with the construction of the drawing. I rushed through it, and I got too fast, and there was a little problem with it, and people pointed it out, and I just thanked them for it. It rang true. I looked at it, and yep, you're right. I messed that part up. A lot of times I'll get advice where it's more of an opinion kind of a thing, where it's not a right or wrong. It's just the way they would do it. Again, I just thank them for it. There's no reason to, and that's number 5. I'm jumping ahead right here. Number 5 is don't disagree with the advice unless it's clear that they don't understand a key component of your art, that clarifying it might help them take back, or not that you're trying to get them to take back the critique, but you might be in a conversation with them. It might turn into a discussion, and there's a key piece of information that you can clearly tell by their comments they don't understand. And if they understood it, they probably would rescind that type of a critique. But other than that, don't disagree with them. This is someone who is trying to help you, and it doesn't matter whether they got it right or wrong. You don't have to follow it. That would be actually, I'm going to put 7 on here. I'm going to make number 6, or number 6, 7, and I'm going to throw in another number 6. And that is, you don't have to take the advice that you're given, right? This is your work. This is up to you. This is your decision. And even if the person's right and you don't like it, you might, in the back of your mind somewhere, you might be like, I know they're right, but I don't want to change this. Don't change it. Because what's going to happen is over time, you're going to realize that they were right. And then eventually you'll incorporate that into your work in the future. So just, you don't have to disagree. You don't have to do what they say. Now, some people will worry, like and I think this is where Nat was going with that on his letter, is that some people feel like they have to take advice because everybody's trying to be really polite. And it's like, oh, this person told me to do this, so maybe I should do it. We've got to be grown up, and the person giving the critique has to be grown up enough to realize that in the end of the day, you're going to make the decisions that you feel right about, and that as giving a critique, they're going to have to feel right about it. And we don't have to apologize for that. I'm a teacher, and my students don't take my advice a lot of times, and I don't take it personally. I just figure they're on their own level right now, and eventually this stuff will either ring true to them, or they probably won't be doing art anymore. And that might sound a little arrogant. I mean, I'm not always right, but I'm talking about like pretty common and clear principles that you should, almost everybody kind of follows in some way or another. And then the last one is, or number 7 would be, thank them even if you disagree, right? So just thank them, like, thank you for those words of advice. And then you're smiling, but you're not going to take it, or you are going to take it. But either way, thank them for it. And this is going to help build that relationship. So there you go. And then just some general other things to go along with this. If you're starting out and you get bad advice, right? So this was another concern in the letter. What if someone's giving bad advice and someone's taking it? And kind of where I put that is, I think that's a natural progression. I think that that there's no real harm done there, because if you can't tell you're getting bad advice, eventually you will. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's better to generate and develop these relationships than to hold back and go, I'm not ready to give critiques and I'm not ready to post my work and stuff. I don't think that the harm will come much by getting bad advice and following it. I think that there will be a natural progression out of that. But if you disagree, I'd love to know why. And I already talked about, if you feel that someone expects you to make changes, that will happen, and don't worry about it. Now, what happens if you feel like you're receiving conflicting advice? And in that case, I would say, if you feel like you're receiving conflicting advice, it could be a couple different things going on. One, it could be that the people giving advice are really kind of on the lower end and really don't um, know what they're talking about, perhaps. But probably more likely, what's going on is that you're either getting two people that have completely different visions, and both could be right. They could be conflicting, but they could be taking your art in a different direction, and they could both be good solutions. So that's a possibility. So just know that at the end of the day, you have to pick one. Another thing that can happen is it's much easier to critique a work of art that is in the good range to in the really good range. If it's great art, if it's amazing art, it probably doesn't need a critique and probably wouldn't benefit much. But if it's really good or just good, it's so much easier to talk about and figure out the little things that are wrong with it than it is if the work is kind of poor. And if it's poor, you're going to get conflicting advice a lot because that's where the work can really be taken in many different directions. It's not that directional already. It really needs a lot of help, and that help could go in different directions. So, and if you're getting conflicting advice all the time, or if teachers are disagreeing, it probably means that there's too many things wrong with your composition or with the overall concept, to where it's vague and nobody really knows where to take it, so that everybody takes it in a different path. And the last thing is basically if you hear the same advice twice or three times or more, that's a good indication that those people are right, and that's a good indication that that's advice that you should probably follow. So that's all I have to say about getting and receiving a critique. And don't subscribe to this channel unless you want to hear more stuff like this.